Welcome back, everyone, to the goatcastpodcast. I am CW, and today we continue our series titled 96 Bulls Versus. If you didn't catch the last video in the series, we discussed the 96 Bulls against the 2001 Los Angeles Lakers. And I'd advise checking that out to get the breakdown on how I'd see a 7-game series going between those two teams. You can click in the right-hand corner to check it out. But today, we continue the series with another team from those 2000s, a team that won 3 championships through 2K, and that team is the 2003 San Antonio Spurs. While the 96 Bulls hold the second greatest regular season in history, they're a team to have collected that legendary record and put a cherry on top with the 4th ring in 6 years. Meanwhile, the Spurs were 4 years removed from their first chip, with Greg Popovich and Tim Duncan at the helm. So today we will discuss these two championship teams and who I think will walk away the victors after a 7-game series. But first, if you enjoy these breakdowns and analysis, please like and subscribe to the channel. It just helps the channel grow as we are in the hunt for 400 subs and keeps the channel moving forward. All right, now the 96 Bulls versus 03 Spurs. The 2003 San Antonio Spurs were the top team in the Western Conference in 2003 after trailing the Kings in 2002 and being trampled once again by the Shaq and Kobe-led Lakers. In the 2003 NBA playoffs, the Spurs were able to take down the Stephon Marbury, Amari Stoudemire, Penny Hardaway Suns, finally exercised the demon that was the Shaq and Kobe Lakers, as well as the Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash Dallas Mavs, on their way to winning the 03 finals over the Jason Kidd New Jersey Nets. While David Robinson was on his last legs, succumbing to father time and a back injury, Tim Duncan was his all-star and Hall of Fame self, averaging 23 points per game and nearly 13 rebounds, en route to his second ring. A solid supporting cast of a young Tony Parker and Steven Jackson chipped in 16 points per game and 12 points per game respectively. This was also Manu Ginobili's first season in the NBA. The 96 Chicago Bulls, well, do I need to go through this again? This was Jordan's first full season back after his first retirement after the 93 season, and also when Dennis Rodman joined the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls in 96 ran through the Eastern Conference and won number 4 for Mike and crew, where they were able to overpower a very respectable Sean Kemp and Gary Payton Seattle Supersonics, or for you younger cats, the now Oklahoma City Thunder. In those playoffs, Jordan erupted to average 31 points with Scotty, Rodman, Kukoc, among others, aiding the effort where needed. Their showing throughout the season and playoffs was something of legends and is still lauded as one of the greatest seasons of all time. So in a highly anticipated 7-game series, who would win? Let's first look at their seasons. The 2003 San Antonio Spurs had the 12th best offense in the league that year, averaging a pretty low 95.8 points per game. Their defense, you'd expect being a pop-led team, was solid as they were the 3rd in the NBA, with their opponents averaging 90.4 points per game. While the offense wasn't exactly league-leading, their defense was able to keep teams nearly under 90 points and far from what we see in today's NBA. Meanwhile, as we've shown before, the 96 Chicago Bulls had the best offense of the season, averaging 105.2 a game, and on defense, they were 3rd best that year, only allowing other teams 92.9 points a game. Pretty solid on both ends of the floor. This series feels a little more even than viewing the stats between the 96 Bulls and the 2001 Lakers. Now let's talk about the team's advantages. First, the Spurs, with Tim Duncan seasoned and entering and remaining in his prime. His leadership, along with Greg Popovich, was what kept the Spurs squad in title contention. With some tough young assets in Tony Parker, Steven Jackson, and Manu Ginobili, mixed in with solid veterans like a past his prime David Robinson, Steve Smith, Steve Kerr, and Kevin Willis. This team had the perfect mix of youth and hard-nosed veterans. So the advantages are, of course, seasoned, primed Tim Duncan, solid defense, and toughness. Bruce Bowen, Manu Ginobili, Malik Rose, Tim Duncan, Steven Jackson, these guys were all really tough defensively and even on the offensive end. As for the Bulls, this collective had a thirsty Michael Jordan stepping away from the sport he loved to try the other game he enjoyed, baseball. After finding minimal success, he returned wearing the 4-5, and after a full season was back atop the NBA as the face of the place. Pippen was in his full prime, while Rodman honed in on his rebound and toughness even more. Kukoc had firmly transitioned to the Western game and was a threat on the floor. Adding Phil Jackson still at the helm, plus solid role players like Steve Kerr and Luke Longley, and some solid defense from Ron Harper, you had a team that we could realistically point out quite a few advantages. For this series, they are exceptional defense, once again, a really good defensive team. Of course, they had the GOAT, MJ, and top that off with offensive threats. One including Jordan, also Kukoc, and of course Pippen also could get you some buckets when it mattered. Okay, so now the X factors. So what would be the X factor for the Spurs? The young others. Shaq has kind of coined the phrase "the others" on Inside the NBA on TNT, so I'm stealing it and using it here. In the case of the Spurs, guys like the rookie Ginobili, a young Tony Parker, the wild Steven Jackson, and even Bruce Bowen need to step up leaps and bounds to keep this series close. As mentioned in their advantages, the Spurs' toughness due to the tough love given by Greg Popovich will likely not be overtaken by the moment. Having had to go to war with those Phil Jackson Lakers, these guys would know how to use their advantages and go reckless abandon against an established squad in the Bulls. The aforementioned wings, mixed with Duncan, would have to step up in big moments not to be suffocated by the Bulls' defense and swarmed by their calculated offense. They'd have to play under absolute control and rely on overall team effort and not just Duncan's inside presence to be truly effective down the stretch. The Bulls' X factor against these 2003 Spurs would be Dennis Rodman and keeping him under control. Rodman is widely known as, well, a wild man. This can be a blessing or a curse in some cases. Against a stoic team like the Spurs, his ability to pester and disrupt the flow of certain players may not be as effective as, say, the matchup with Shaq if he'd played the 2001 Lakers. Tim Duncan seems to be fairly unflappable, and aged injury-stricken David Robinson would likely not be much of a factor in the first place. So Rodman's duties would come down to slowing down the young power forward, and that is easier said than done. If Rodman cannot use his physicality and frustrating defense against Tim Duncan, then the Bulls could be in trouble, as the Spurs' inside-outside game that they played for much of the 2000s was able to carve defenses up, even against top-tier D, as we saw in the 2003 final series against the then second-rated defense in the NBA, New Jersey Nets. If Rodman can't stymie the big fundamental, the Bulls might be in for a grind-em-out type series where every possession is key to victory. So who wins? In my opinion, this could be some classic basketball on display through a 7-game series. Home court advantage really isn't a thing to me when you have two championship caliber teams. Coaching could play a factor, but I feel that Popovich and Phil Jackson are both chess players that will make the right moves, but even then, it all comes down to the players on the court. However, I have to stick with my gut feeling, and that tells me we will see yet another 96 Bulls victory. And once again, Bulls triumph in a hard-fought series, winning 4-2. At this point in time, the Spurs had to lean heavily on Duncan, and against a team with multiple options that are proven in big games against a team with some young talent that may not have been ready for the defensive assault the Bulls would surely roll out. I think it's too much for the Spurs to beat that Bulls team 4 times. Bruce Bowen will give Jordan fits, and Malik Rose, another big contributor for that 03 Spurs team, would be a problem for that Jordan-led team, but I just don't think San Antonio has the scoring to combat what Chicago could put on the floor. Couple that with this being David Robinson and Steve Kerr's final year for the Spurs, the Admiral especially had to be carried throughout most of those playoffs and was a minimal factor at best on the court. Bulls Kerr would have his way with Spurs Kerr, who was still a rotation player but wasn't quite the marksman as his younger self. Now, there's another Spurs team I would definitely want to see against these 96 Bulls, but we'll visit those Spurs at another time. So what about you guys? Do you agree, disagree? Do you think it could go 7, or could it even go fewer? Let me know in the comments section, and since I'm sticking with the 2000s for one more entry in the 96 Bulls versus 2000 teams, let me know which team you'd like to see, the 2004 Detroit Pistons or the 2008 Boston Celtics. Also, if you want to ascend to GOAT status like number 23, please hit that like and subscribe button. Helps out the channel and keeps things moving. The road to 400 subscribers is in full effect, and I really appreciate everyone that has been a part of the GoatCast podcast. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll be back soon with more content. Thank you.